We're all pretty used to the whole sharing economy, right? We grab a shared ride, we stay in someone's home. It's just part of life now. But what if I told you the real revolution in sharing, the one that's kind of flying under the radar, isn't for us. It's for businesses. Yeah, entire companies. Let's get into it.
And that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we're taught that business is all about competition, right? Dog eat dog, winner take all. But some really interesting research is flipping that idea on its head. It suggests that for smaller companies, the secret to survival, well, it might not be about fighting harder, but about working together in a way that's kind of radical.
Okay, so before we get into the solution, we got to understand the problem. Why is this even a thing? What's the big dilemma that small and medium-sized businesses are facing right now?
And it really boils down to this. If you're running what's called an SME, a small or medium-sized enterprise, you are always, and I mean always, fighting an uphill battle. The big corporations, they've got the cash for big investments, they can snap up all the cutting-edge tech, and they get the pick of the litter when it comes to talent. It's just not a level playing field. And honestly, it's only getting harder.
But this is where things get interesting. What if, instead of all those smaller companies fighting each other for the leftovers, they just decided to team up? What if they pooled their resources? That is the whole idea behind the B2B, or business-to-business, sharing economy.
Now, the official definition here is pretty cool because it's deeper than you might think. This isn't just, renting out a forklift that's gathering dust in the corner. It's a really structured way for companies to work together. It's about either lending out stuff you're not using or, and this is the really powerful part, teaming up to buy and share something brand new that none of you could ever afford on your own.
So the research breaks this down into two main types. Type 1. Think of it like Airbnb, but for businesses. You've got an asset, say a specialized piece of equipment or some extra warehouse space, and it's just sitting there unused half the time. Well, why not lend it out to another company and make a little cash? Easy enough. Then there's Type 2. This one's more like a bunch of friends getting together to buy a vacation home they can all share. It's a joint investment to get something big and awesome that's out of reach for any single one of them.
Okay, that all sounds great, right? But how do you actually pull it off? This stuff gets complicated. You can't just rely on a handshake and good intentions. You need a real plan. And that's exactly what this research provides, a literal blueprint to make it happen.
And that's the key here. The researchers treated this like they were designing a building. They created this blueprint with 8 key building blocks. It's a template that any group of businesses can follow to construct their own successful sharing partnership.
And here they are, the 8 components of that blueprint. You'll recognize a lot of these. Things like cost structure, revenue streams, pretty standard business stuff. But a couple of them are especially important for this kind of model. And we're going to zoom in on one that's a real game changer. Business actors. So what are business actors? This is what makes this whole thing so unique. We're not just talking about a couple of partners. No, this is way bigger. Business actors includes the companies putting in the money, of course, but it also includes outside experts who might be hired to manage the shared thing, and even government groups that chip in with support or funding. It's not a partnership, it's a whole ecosystem.
All right, so enough with the theory. Let's see how this blueprint actually works in the real world. Because the researchers didn't just cook this up in a lab, they put it to the test with an amazing case study about a shipbuilding cooperative over in South Korea.
So what was the big problem they were trying to solve? Well, the goal was simple but huge. Bring down costs. You had all these smaller dockyards and companies that supply materials for shipbuilding, and their biggest headache was paying for storage and transport of these massive components. That was the mission.
See, by themselves, none of these little guys could dream of affording a big, modern, super efficient distribution center. So they were stuck. They had to pay whatever the market rate was for storage and logistics, and it was absolutely crushing their profits. It was making it impossible to compete.
And this is where that business actor's building block just clicks into place. Look at the players. You had the investors, that was the dockyards and material companies putting up the cash. You had an exterior cooperator. This logistics company called Saybank was brought in to actually run the whole operation. And then, and this is so important, you had the supporters. Both the central and local governments pitched in with funding to make it all happen. So what was the big solution? They pooled their money and built a massive shared distribution center. And hey, if this sounds familiar, it should. This is a textbook perfect example of that Type 2 sharing model we talked about, a joint investment in something new that was impossible for them to get on their own. And the results? You gotta hear this. They were absolutely incredible.
By teaming up, these small companies got access to this top-of-the-line facility, and their storage fees dropped to just 50 to 60% of what they used to pay. Let me say that again, they cut their costs almost in half. This wasn't just a nice little savings. This was a total game changer for their entire business.
Okay, so that's one amazing story. But what does it all mean? What are the big takeaways? Why does this model matter beyond just one industry and one country?
Well, the potential benefits are just massive. Yeah, cutting costs is the obvious one. But think about it. You can create totally new revenue streams from stuff that's just sitting around. You stop that crazy, wasteful cycle where 10 different companies all buy the same machine and only use it 20% of the time. You can even lower the risk of trying out a new venture because you're sharing the cost and the gamble.
But really, when you boil it all down, the biggest thing here is a shift in thinking. It's a total mindset shift. It's about moving away from that old-school dog-eat-dog idea of pure competition and moving towards smart, strategic cooperation. It's about finally realizing that maybe, just maybe, the best way to win isn't to beat everyone else, but to help everyone around you win too.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. In a world where giant corporations seem to dominate everything, maybe the most revolutionary thing a small business can do isn't to create a new product. Maybe it's to create a new kind of partnership. Could this kind of radical cooperation be the future for the little guy? Not just to survive, but to actually thrive? It's definitely something to think about.